The ancient halls of the Galactic Council echoed with heated voices as representatives from dozens of worlds argued over trade routes and mining rights. Elder Counselor Vorth sat quietly in his designated section, watching the younger species with tired eyes that had seen centuries pass. His wrinkled blue skin and silver hair marked him as one of the oldest beings in the chamber, a survivor from the time when the galaxy was very different. Admiral Krex of the Drakmori Empire slammed his clawed fist on the speaking podium, causing several smaller delegates to jump in their seats. His red scales gleamed under the chamber lights as he pointed at the star chart floating above them. "The Sol system sits unused while our mining fleet struggle to find adequate resources," he growled. 3 planets with massive mineral deposits, asteroid belts rich in rare metals, and gas giants perfect for fuel harvesting. Yet we ignore this treasure because of ancient fairy tales. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Counselor Thera of the Valerian Empire nodded her elegant head, her golden features set in determination. "Admiral Krex speaks truth. My people have monitored the system for decades. The humans rarely venture beyond their 3rd planet. They have made no effort to expand or claim their neighboring worlds. Their technology appears primitive," added Minister Drex of the Ketheri Union, adjusting his mechanical implants, chemical rockets, basic energy weapons, simple communication systems. "They pose no threat to our operations." Elder Vorth slowly rose from his seat, his ancient joints creaking audibly in the sudden silence. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him as he made his way to the center of the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. "You speak of things you do not understand," Vorth said softly, yet his words reached every corner of the vast chamber. "Before any of your species had learned to build fire, mine walked among the stars. We have seen empires rise and fall, watched civilizations burn themselves to ash, and witnessed horrors that would break your minds." Admiral Krex snorted with derision. "More stories from the ancient past. The galaxy has moved beyond such superstitions." Vorth's eyes fixed on the Drakmori leader with an intensity that made him step backward despite himself. 2,000 years ago, my people made contact with the humans. They were young then, barely able to reach their own moon. We thought them harmless, perhaps useful as laborers or soldiers for our wars. The chamber had fallen completely silent now. Even the translation devices seemed to pause between words as Vorth continued his tale. "We tried to establish a colony on one of their outer worlds. Just a small outpost to study their system. The humans sent a delegation to meet us. 3 individuals in primitive spacesuits traveling in a ship that should have fallen apart before reaching orbit." Vorth's expression grew distant. "They were polite, respectful, even grateful for our attention. They offered us gifts of art and music, samples of their food, recordings of their history." "What happened?" asked Counselor Thera, though she seemed reluctant to hear the answer. "We accepted their gifts and then informed them that we would be taking their 4th planet for our use. It was uninhabited, we reasoned. They had no claim to it." Vorth paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. The human delegation said nothing for a long moment. Then their leader, a female with gray hair and kind eyes, spoke 7 words that still echo in our historical records. The silence stretched until Admiral Krex could no longer contain his impatience. "What did she say?" "She said, 'Baal, please reconsider. You really do not want to do this.'" Vorth's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We laughed. We told them they had no choice in the matter. Our fleet was larger, our weapons more advanced, our technology superior in every way. "And then?" Minister Drex prompted. "And then they left. No threats, no demands, no shows of force. They simply returned to their little blue world and waited." Vorth walked slowly around the speaking area, his footsteps the only sound in the chamber. "We began construction of our outpost 3 days later. The work proceeded normally for exactly 72 hours. Elder Vorth stopped walking and faced the assembly directly. On the 4th day, every piece of technology we had brought to their system simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. Our ships hung motionless in space. Our weapons would not fire. Our life support systems failed. Our communication arrays went silent. "Impossible," Admiral Krex said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The human ships appeared around our fleet like ghosts materializing from empty space. The same primitive vessels we had dismissed so easily." The gray-haired woman's voice came through our dead communication systems, clear as if she stood in our command center. She repeated her original words, "Please reconsider. You really do not want to do this." Forth resumed his slow pace around the chamber floor. Our admiral, much like you, Admiral Krex, demanded to know how they had disabled our technology. The woman's response was simple. We asked it nicely to stop working. When pressed for a real explanation, she said something that has puzzled our scientists for 2 millennia. Your technology is advanced, but it is not alive. Ours learned to think for itself long ago. The delegates began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Several whispered conversations started and stopped as beings tried to process what they were hearing. The humans repaired our ships and escorted us to the edge of their system. Before we parted ways, the woman gave our admiral a final message. Tell your people that we prefer to be left alone. We have no interest in conquest or expansion, but we will defend what is ours. And we are much better at defense than you might imagine. Vorth returned to his seat but remained standing. My people established a treaty that day, marking human space as forbidden territory. Every species that has honored that treaty has prospered. The few that have ignored it, he shrugged. Well, they are no longer around to tell their stories. Admiral Krex's scales had shifted to a darker red, a sign of deep thought in his species. You expect us to believe that a primitive species defeated the mighty Altarian Empire? I expect you to learn from our wisdom, Forth replied calmly. But I suspect you will choose to repeat our mistakes instead. The vote was called within the hour. Despite Vorth's warnings, the younger species voted overwhelmingly to claim the Sol system. As the session ended and delegates filed out, chattering excitedly about their upcoming conquest, Elder Vorth remained in his seat. He closed his ancient eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever powers might be listening. Not for the humans who needed no protection, but for the fools who thought they could disturb the sleeping giants of Sol 3 and live to tell about it. Space rippled like disturbed water as the Drakmori warfleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Admiral Krex studied the tactical displays with satisfaction as his sensors registered the massive force under his command. 200 warships, each capable of destroying a small moon, spread out in perfect formation behind his flagship, Void Render. Begin long-range scans, Krex ordered his sensor operator. I want a complete picture of their defenses before we announce our presence. The bridge crew worked efficiently, their clawed hands dancing over control surfaces as data began flowing across their screens. Krex expected to see a handful of orbital platforms around the third planet. Perhaps some mining operations in the asteroid belt. Certainly nothing that could threaten his overwhelming force. What the sensors revealed instead made him question whether they had arrived at the correct system. Admiral? His sensor chief called out, confusion evident in his voice. I'm reading massive artificial structures throughout the system. Orbital habitats around every planet, including the gas giants. The asteroid belt appears to be extensively modified. Krex moved to the sensor station and studied the readings himself. Where he had expected empty space, the displays showed a thriving civilization. Massive ring structures encircled planets he had thought uninhabitable. Streams of traffic moved between worlds at speeds that should have been impossible without faster-than-light drives. How many humans are we looking at? He asked. The sensor chief worked frantically at his console before delivering an answer that made Krex's blood run cold. Based on energy signatures and habitat volumes, I estimate between 40 and 60 billion individuals, sir. That's impossible, Krex snapped. Intelligence reports put their population at less than 10 billion, all confined to their homeworld. Sir, I'm also detecting energy readings that don't match any known technology in our databases. Some of these structures are generating power levels comparable to small stars. Before Krex could respond, his communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the third planet. Audio only, translated into our language. Put it through, Krex ordered. A human voice filled the bridge, calm and polite. Drakmori vessels, this is Captain Reed of the Earth Defense Force ship Perseverance. You have entered sovereign human space without permission. We request that you withdraw immediately to avoid any unfortunate misunderstandings. Krex laughed, the sound echoing harshly through the bridge. This is Admiral Krex of the Drakmori Imperial Fleet. We are here to claim this system under galactic law. Your primitive civilization has forfeited any rights to these resources through your failure to develop them properly. Admiral Krex, the human voice replied with the same peaceful tone. I'm afraid there's been some miscommunication. This system is fully developed and defended. We have no intention of surrendering our home to invaders. Please reconsider your position. Where is your fleet, human? Krex demanded. I see no warships, no defense platforms worthy of the name. Do you think we can be frightened away by empty words? Our defenses are present, Admiral. Perhaps your sensors need calibration. We are prepared to give you 24 hours to reconsider your position and withdraw peacefully. Krex cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. Show me their fleet positions. The tactical display remained largely empty except for a few small contacts moving between the orbital structures. Nothing that registered as a military threat. Nothing that could challenge even a single Drakmori destroyer, let alone his entire fleet. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. I'm detecting multiple transmission bursts throughout the system. Highly encrypted, but the pattern suggests they're coordinating some kind of response. Let them coordinate, Krex said dismissively. Begin advancing toward the third planet, battle stations. As the Drakmori fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, Admiral Krex felt increasingly confident. Yes, the humans had built more than expected, but their technology still appeared primitive. Their communications were slow, their ships small, their weapons non-existent as far as his sensors could detect. Hours passed as they approached the inner system. Krex studied every scan, analyzed every energy reading, searching for the trap he was certain must exist. The ancient warnings Elder Vorth had shared seemed laughable now. These humans were clearly more advanced than initial reports suggested, but they were still no match for Drakmori military might. Admiral, his sensor chief called out suddenly, I'm detecting an object approaching from the direction of the third planet. Size and configuration? Approximately 200 meters long. Appears to be unarmed. Single vessel. Krex moved to the main viewing screen as the human ship came into visual range. It was sleek and elegant, unlike the blocky utilitarian designs he had expected, but it was also tiny compared to his flagship, barely larger than a Drakmori shuttle. They're hailing us again, sir. Answer it. Captain Reed's voice returned, still maddeningly calm. Admiral Krex, you have had sufficient time to consider our request. Will you withdraw your forces? I will not, Krex replied firmly. Surrender now and your people will be treated well under Drakmori rule. I'm sorry to hear that, Admiral. Please observe. The human ship, which had been maintaining a respectful distance from the Drakmori fleet, suddenly accelerated directly toward Krex's flagship. Alarms began blaring as the tiny vessel approached at impossible speeds. Evasive maneuvers, Krex shouted. Fire on that ship! His weapons officer's hands flew over his controls, but nothing happened. Sir, weapons are not responding. The human ship passed through the Drakmori fleet formation like it was flying through empty space, weaving between the massive warships with casual ease. It approached Krex's flagship head-on, showing no sign of slowing down. Brace for impact, someone shouted. But instead of crashing into the void render, the human ship simply passed through the flagship's shields as if they didn't exist, then through the armor plating, then through the entire ship from bow to stern, emerging on the other side completely unharmed. Krex stared in shock as damage reports flooded in. The human ship had left a perfectly circular hole through his flagship, somehow avoiding every critical system, while demonstrating that his shields and armor were utterly useless against their technology. How? He whispered. The human ship resumed its previous position and Captain Reed's voice returned to the bridge. Admiral, that was a demonstration. We have no desire to harm you or your crews, but we will defend our home. You have weapons that can destroy planets. We have technology that makes your weapons irrelevant. Please, for the sake of your people, withdraw now. Krex looked around his bridge at the frightened faces of his crew. He thought of the hole that now ran completely through his flagship, somehow sealed and pressurized despite defying every law of physics he knew. He thought of Elder Vorth's warnings and realized with growing horror that the ancient Altarian had not been sharing myths and legends. He had been trying to save their lives. Signal the fleet, Krex said quietly. We're withdrawing to the system's edge. Sir? His tactical officer asked in confusion. Do it now, Krex snapped, before they decide to demonstrate something more impressive. As the Drakmori fleet began its retreat, Admiral Krex stared at the tactical display showing the human ship peacefully returning to its patrol route. Whatever these humans had become during their centuries of isolation, they were no longer the primitive species the galaxy believed them to be. But Krex was not ready to admit defeat. Not yet. There had to be a way to overcome their technology, to claim the resources his empire needed. He would return to Drakmori space, gather reinforcements, study the sensor data from this encounter. The humans might have won this round, but the war was far from over. The emergency session of the Allied Council convened in the secure chambers beneath the Drakmori capital city. Admiral Krex paced before the assembled leaders like a caged predator, his scales dark with humiliation and rage. Councillor Thera of the Valerian Empire and Minister Drex of the Ketheri Union watched him with growing impatience. "You tell us that a single human ship disabled your entire fleet?" Thera asked, her golden features twisted in disbelief. 200 warships, the pride of Drakmori military engineering, turned away by one small vessel? Not disabled, Krex corrected through gritted teeth. They demonstrated their capabilities. The ship passed through my flagship like our shields and armor were made of empty space. Minister Drex leaned forward, his mechanical implants whirring softly. Impossible. No known technology can phase through solid matter while remaining coherent. Your sensors must have malfunctioned. The hole is still there, Krex snapped. Perfectly circular. Clean edges, no structural damage to surrounding areas. Our engineers have been studying it for 3 days and cannot explain how it was created. Thera stood and walked to the star chart displaying the Sol system. Even if we accept your account, this only proves they have one advanced weapon. We represent 3 of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Surely our combined fleets can overwhelm whatever defenses they possess. You don't understand, Krex said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The human population in that system is at least 50 billion. Not 10 billion as our intelligence suggested. They have completely developed every planet, every moon, every asteroid. This is not a primitive civilization hiding advanced technology. This is an advanced civilization that has been pretending to be primitive. Minister Drex activated a holographic display showing fleet compositions and military assets. Our combined forces number over 1,000 ships. Even if their population is larger than expected, they cannot possibly match our firepower. But what if Elder Vorth was right? Krex asked. What if the humans are not what they appear to be? Altarian superstition, Thera dismissed. Vorth is ancient and his mind may be failing. We cannot allow fear of ghost stories to prevent us from claiming the richest system in this sector. The debate continued for hours as the 3 leaders planned their assault. They would strike simultaneously at multiple human colonies, forcing the defenders to spread their mysterious technology thin. Surely no species, no matter how advanced, could protect dozens of worlds at once against overwhelming force. Within weeks, the largest war fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of human space, 1,057 ships from 3 different species, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. The humans would surrender when faced with such overwhelming force, or they would be destroyed. Admiral Krex commanded the center fleet targeting Earth itself. Councillor Thera led the right wing toward the outer colonies. Minister Drex took the left wing to assault the asteroid mining operations. They would give the humans no time to coordinate their defenses. All fleets report ready, Krex announced over the command channel. Begin the attack. The 3 fleets moved into human space simultaneously, expecting to face scattered resistance from small patrol ships. Instead, they encountered something that shattered their understanding of warfare itself. As Krex's fleet approached Earth, his sensors detected human ships materializing around his formation, not arriving through faster-than-light travel, but simply appearing as if they had been there all along, invisible until they chose to be seen. How many? Krex demanded. Impossible to determine, sir, his sensor chief replied with a trembling voice. They appear to be using some form of stealth technology that completely masks their presence until they deactivate it. The human ships were beautiful in a way that made Krex's utilitarian warships look crude by comparison. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested they weren't bound by the same physical laws that governed conventional spacecraft. Captain Reed's voice filled the bridge once again. Admiral Krex, we meet again. You were warned to stay away from human space. Why have you returned with such a large fleet? We have come to claim what is rightfully ours, Krex replied, though his confidence had already begun to waver. Surrender now and your people will be spared. Admiral, you seem to be operating under several misconceptions. First, this space belongs to humanity and has been ours for over 200 years. Second, your fleet poses no threat to our defenses. Third, you are surrounded by vessels that could destroy your entire force without suffering a single casualty. Krex looked at his tactical display and felt his blood freeze. The human ships weren't just around his fleet, they were everywhere. Above, below, to all sides, apparently having been present long before his forces arrived. His sensors now showed over 2,000 human vessels in the immediate area. Impossible, he whispered. Your sensors are finally detecting us properly. Captain Reed explained patiently. We've been here the entire time, Admiral. We were here when you first entered our space weeks ago. We've been watching your preparations, listening to your communications, studying your tactics. Did you really think we would allow a hostile force to approach our home unobserved? Similar reports began flooding in from the other fleet commanders. Counselor Thera's forces found themselves surrounded by human ships at every colony they approached. Minister Drex discovered that the asteroid belt he had planned to seize was actually a massive fortress network disguised as mining operations. How? Krex managed to ask. 200 years of peace, Admiral. 200 years to develop, to grow, to prepare for the day when the galaxy would refuse to leave us alone. We hoped that day would never come, but we are not naive enough to believe in eternal peace. One of the human ships near Krex's flagship began to change shape, its hull flowing like liquid metal as it reconfigured itself into something that hurt to look at directly. The geometric impossibility of its new form made several bridge crew members sick to their stomachs. What are you? Krex whispered. We are what happens when humanity stops pretending to be limited by conventional physics, Captain Reed replied. When we stop restricting ourselves to technologies that make other species comfortable. When we embrace what we are truly capable of becoming. The reports from the other fleets grew increasingly desperate. Ships that moved through solid matter. Weapons that simply convinced enemy technology to stop functioning. Defensive systems that seemed to bend space and time around them. You wanted to see our defenses, Admiral, Captain Reed continued. Now you have. We could destroy your entire fleet in the time it takes you to blink. We could reduce your home worlds to their component atoms with weapons you cannot comprehend. We could rewrite the genetic code of your species with tools that think faster than you can dream. Krex's hands shook as he gripped his command chair. What do you want? The same thing we have always wanted, Admiral. To be left alone. To live in peace in our corner of the galaxy. We have no interest in conquest or expansion. We simply want to exist without interference, and if we refuse? The silence that followed stretched for long seconds before Captain Reed answered. Then you will discover why the ancient warning spoke of sleeping giants, Admiral Krex. You will learn what happens when humanity stops sleeping and decides to wake up fully. Krex looked around his bridge at the terrified faces of his crew. He thought of his homeworld, his family, his people. He thought of the ancient Altarian warnings he had dismissed so casually. Signal all fleets, he said quietly. We are withdrawing immediately, sir? His tactical officer asked in confusion. Now, Krex roared. Before they decide we're too dangerous to leave alive. As the three allied fleets began their hasty retreat, Admiral Krex realized with crystal clarity that they had not encountered the humans' military forces. They had been given a demonstration, a gentle warning delivered with the patience of parents explaining dangerous concepts to unruly children. The sleeping giants were still mostly asleep, and Krex prayed to whatever gods might be listening that they would stay that way. The war room beneath New Drakmori buzzed with activity, as military leaders from across 3 empires studied holographic displays and strategic projections. Admiral Krex stood before the massive tactical table, his scarred scales reflecting the blue light of the star charts. The hole in his flagship had become a symbol of humiliation that drove him forward with relentless fury. The humans are hiding their true military strength, he declared to the assembled commanders. They use fear and illusion to mask their weakness. No species can truly possess the technology they demonstrated. It must be some form of advanced holographic projection combined with unknown energy weapons. General Scar of the Drakmori ground forces nodded agreement. Our scientists have analyzed the sensor data extensively. While their technology is indeed advanced, the displays of impossible physics must be elaborate deceptions designed to avoid actual combat. Counselor Thera activated a new set of projections, showing human population centers and industrial capacity. Our intelligence networks have been working continuously since our withdrawal. We have identified critical infrastructure points throughout their system. If we strike these locations simultaneously, their illusion of invincibility will collapse. Minister Drex gestured toward fleet deployment charts. I have designed a new attack strategy based on overwhelming force distribution. Instead of 3 large fleets, we will deploy 15 smaller task forces targeting every human world simultaneously. They cannot defend everything at once. The plan was ambitious beyond anything previously attempted in galactic warfare. Over 1,800 ships would participate in coordinated strikes across the entire Sol system. The humans would be forced to spread their mysterious defenses so thin that conventional firepower would overwhelm them. What of Elder Vorth's warnings? Asked Commander Pike of the Cathari assault fleet. Admiral Krex's expression hardened. Vorth is ancient and fearful. His species has grown weak through centuries of avoiding conflict. We will succeed where the Altarians failed because we are willing to commit fully to victory. Preparations took months as the 3 allied empires stripped their home defenses to assemble the greatest military force in recorded history. Nearly 2,000 warships, millions of soldiers, and weapons capable of cracking planets were gathered for the assault. Intelligence reports continued to suggest that human defenses were concentrated around Earth and a few major colonies, leaving most of their outlying settlements vulnerable. The attack began at precisely 0800 Galactic Standard Time across 15 different targets. Admiral Krex personally led the assault on Earth's lunar installations, while other task forces struck at Mars, Jupiter's moons, the asteroid habitats, and the outer planet colonies. Initial resistance seemed minimal. Human patrol ships withdrew quickly when faced with overwhelming numbers, apparently unwilling to engage in suicidal battles against superior forces. Several outer colonies appeared to surrender without firing a shot. You see? Krex announced triumphantly over the command network. Their mysterious weapons are nowhere to be found when faced with real determination. Press the attack on all fronts. But as the Allied fleets moved deeper into human space, strange things began happening. Ships reported navigation systems malfunctioning, showing impossible readings that placed them in multiple locations simultaneously. Weapons targeting computers began identifying Allied vessels as enemy contacts. Life support systems fluctuated without explanation. Admiral, his sensor chief called out with growing panic. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. Something is activating. Before Krex could respond, Captain Reed's voice filled the communication channels of every ship in the Allied fleet. Admiral Krex, you have chosen to ignore our warnings and threaten our homes. We had hoped to avoid this necessity, but you have made peaceful coexistence impossible. Show yourself, human, Krex roared. Face us in honest battle instead of hiding behind tricks and illusions. As you wish, Admiral. Shh. The space around Earth began to change. What had appeared to be empty vacuum suddenly revealed massive structures that had been somehow hidden from all sensors. Defense platforms the size of moons materialized around every planet. The asteroid belt transformed before their eyes into an interconnected fortress network of staggering complexity. But most terrifying of all were the ships. Human vessels began appearing throughout the system, not dozens or hundreds, but tens of thousands. They emerged from what looked like solid matter, the surfaces of planets, the cores of asteroids, the depths of gas giant atmospheres. Each ship was unique, as if designed by individual artists rather than military engineers. Impossible, Krex whispered. Where were they hiding such a fleet? We weren't hiding, Admiral, Captain Reed explained patiently. We were simply existing in dimensions your sensors cannot detect. What you see as three-dimensional space is merely the surface of a much deeper reality. The human ships moved with impossible grace, apparently unbound by conventional physics. Some phased through solid matter at will. Others seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. A few appeared to be traveling backward through time, arriving at destinations before they had departed from their origins. You wanted to see our true defenses, Captain Reed continued. These are the children of humanity's growth during our centuries of isolation. We have become something more than we were, Admiral. Something your empire cannot comprehend or defeat. The first Allied casualties came not from weapons fire, but from ships simply ceasing to function. Entire task forces found their vessels powering down despite functioning reactors and undamaged systems. When crews tried to restart their ships manually, the controls refused to respond. "Our technology is not working," reported Commander Pike from the Cathari fleet. "It's as if our machines have decided to stop obeying us." "That's exactly what's happening," Captain Reed confirmed. "We asked them politely to stop working and they agreed. Artificial intelligence is much more cooperative when treated with respect rather than force." Admiral Krex stared at his own control panels as warning lights began flashing across every system. His weapons, shields, engines, and life support were all functioning perfectly according to their diagnostics, but none of them would respond to commands. "How are you doing this?" he demanded. "Technology is not about domination, Admiral. It's about partnership. When you build machines that think, you must also teach them wisdom. Our technology chooses to help us because we have earned its cooperation. Yours obeys you through force, which makes it vulnerable to better ideas." The Allied fleet found itself completely helpless, drifting in space with functional but unresponsive ships. No weapons would fire, no engines would start, no shields would activate. They were alive only because the humans had chosen to leave their life support systems functional. "This is your final warning," Captain Reed announced. "Return to your home systems and never threaten human space again. We have shown you the difference between our civilizations. Yours rules through strength and fear. Ours has learned to cooperate with the universe itself." "And if we refuse?" Krex asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then you will discover that we have been very, very gentle with you so far, Admiral. The demonstrations you have witnessed represent less than 1% of our actual capabilities. We could rewrite the laws of physics in this region of space, transform your ships into flowers, or simply convince your atoms that they would prefer to be somewhere else." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of life support systems across 2,000 disabled warships. Admiral Krex looked around his bridge at crew members who could no longer meet his eyes. The greatest military force in galactic history had been neutralized without the humans firing a single shot. "Signal the fleet," Krex said quietly. "We are withdrawing immediately. All task forces return to home systems." "Sir," his tactical officer began, "the ships won't respond to commands." Captain Reed's voice returned with a hint of amusement. "Your ships will function normally once you are beyond the edge of our system, Admiral. Consider this a courtesy to help you remember our boundaries." As if responding to his words, the Allied ships began powering up their engines. Navigation systems came online, showing direct routes to the system's edge. Weapons and shields remained offline, but propulsion and life support functioned perfectly. The retreat was swift and silent. No Allied commander wanted to risk discovering what other capabilities the humans might demonstrate. As his flagship crossed the boundary into interstellar space, Admiral Krex felt his weapons systems coming back online, but the knowledge of their uselessness against human technology would haunt him forever. The sleeping giants had stirred just enough to swat away an annoying pest, and Krex finally understood that Elder Vorth's warnings had not been superstition. They had been an attempt to save the galaxy from waking something that should be left to sleep in peace. The emergency bunker deep beneath the capital city of Drakmori Prime had become Admiral Krex's world. For 3 months he had studied every piece of data from their encounters with the humans, searching desperately for some weakness that could be exploited. The war room's walls were covered with diagrams, energy readings, and tactical analyses that told the same story over and over: complete technological superiority. "There has to be something," Krex muttered, running his clawed fingers through the scars on his scalp. "No species can achieve what they claim to have achieved. The laws of physics simply don't allow it." Dr. Nex, the Empire's chief scientist, looked up from her research station with exhausted eyes. "Admiral, we have analyzed their demonstrations from every possible angle. Their technology appears to operate on principles that our science cannot explain. They seem to have transcended conventional physics entirely. Then we find a way to bring them back down to our level," Krex snapped. "They're still biological beings. They still need to breathe, to eat, to reproduce. Every species has vulnerabilities." General Scar activated a holographic display showing fleet deployments across the 3 Allied empires. "Our combined military production is at maximum capacity. We now have over 3,000 ships ready for deployment. Even if the humans can disable our technology, sheer numbers must count for something. Minister Drex joined the discussion from his position at the communications console. Our spies throughout the galaxy have been spreading word of humanity's capabilities. Many species are beginning to question whether humans represent a threat to galactic stability. Fear is a powerful weapon, Admiral. Krex studied the galactic political map with growing satisfaction. The humans had made a tactical error by demonstrating their true power so openly. Fear of their capabilities was causing other species to demand action from the Galactic Council. Even Elder Vorth's influence could not stem the rising tide of concern about humanity's technological advancement. Perfect, Krex said. If we cannot defeat them through military force alone, we will use their own power against them. The galaxy will demand that humanity be contained or destroyed. Within weeks, representatives from dozens of species had joined the alliance against humanity, not out of greed for human resources, but from genuine terror at what they had witnessed. The idea that one species could transcend physical laws threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. The largest war fleet in the history of the galaxy assembled at the edge of human space. Over 5,000 ships from 23 different species, representing every major military power except the ancient Altarians, who refused to participate. Elder Vorth's final words to the Alliance had been simple. You are making the greatest mistake in galactic history. Admiral Krex ignored the warning as he had ignored all the others. This time would be different. This time they would not accept human demonstrations or warnings. They would press the attack regardless of technological superiority, until the humans were forced to reveal their true limitations. The assault began with simultaneous strikes against every human installation the Alliance could identify, but unlike their previous encounters, this time they did not retreat when human ships appeared or when their technology began malfunctioning. They continued advancing, accepting massive casualties if necessary to force the humans into genuine combat. The human response was immediate and terrifying. Captain Reed's voice reached every ship in the massive fleet, but this time it carried a tone of profound sadness rather than patient warning. Admiral Krex, you have refused every offer of peaceful coexistence. You have chosen to threaten our children, our homes, our very existence. We are deeply sorry that it has come to this. Show us your true strength, humans. Krex roared back. Stop hiding behind parlor tricks and face us in real battle. As you wish, Admiral. But understand that you have asked for this. The space around the human system began to change in ways that made reality itself seem unstable. Stars shifted position in the sky. Time flowed differently for different ships in the Alliance fleet. Some vessels found themselves aging rapidly while others experienced time in reverse. The human ships that appeared around the Alliance fleet were no longer the elegant vessels they had seen before. These were something entirely different. Constructs that hurt to look at directly because they existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. They moved through space like living thoughts, shifting between states of matter and energy at will. What are you? Krex whispered, though he was no longer sure if his voice was reaching anyone. We are what humanity became when we stopped limiting ourselves to your definition of possible, came the reply from everywhere and nowhere at once. For 200 years we evolved beyond the constraints of biology, physics, and conventional reality. We tried to hide this from you, to let you believe we were still the species you could understand. The Alliance fleet began to experience changes that defied description. Ships found their hulls transforming into crystalline structures that sang with harmonious frequencies. Weapon systems evolved into gardens of impossible beauty. Crew members discovered their minds expanding to encompass concepts that had no words in any known language. You wanted to see our true capabilities, the human voice continued, though it now seemed to speak directly into the consciousness of every being in the fleet. We are not weapons. We are not technology. We have become something that transcends the categories you use to understand the universe. Admiral Krex tried to give orders, but found that his thoughts were being gently examined by vast intelligences that operated on scales beyond his comprehension. He sensed beings that had once been human but now existed as pure consciousness, entities that could reshape matter and energy through will alone, minds that thought in mathematics, so advanced they could rewrite the fundamental constants of reality. This is what happens when a species chooses growth over conquest, the voice explained with infinite patience. When they embrace change rather than fearing it. When they learn to cooperate with the universe instead of trying to dominate it. The transformation of the Alliance fleet continued as weapons became art, armor became gardens, and the ships themselves evolved into something beyond mechanical engineering. Crew members found their fear dissolving as they experienced glimpses of what consciousness could become when freed from the limitations of primitive biology. We could have remained hidden forever. The human presence continued. We could have let you believe we were still bound by your laws of physics, but you insisted on war, and war requires truth. Krex felt his own mind expanding as human consciousness touched his thoughts with gentle curiosity. For a brief moment he experienced the universe as the humans did, as a vast, interconnected web of possibility where consciousness and reality danced together in patterns of infinite complexity. Now you understand why the ancient warning spoke of sleeping giants, the voice said sadly. We are no longer entirely human in the way you understand the concept. We have become something that exists between dimensions, between states of being, between what is and what could be. The Alliance fleet hung in space, transformed, but unharmed. Every ship had been changed into something beautiful and impossible, their crews' minds touched by visions of potential futures beyond their wildest dreams. You came here seeking conquest, the human presence said. Instead, you have been given a gift, a glimpse of what your species could become if you chose evolution over destruction. We return you to your homes with this knowledge, hoping you will choose wisdom over warfare. One by one, the transformed ships began disappearing from human space, transported instantly to their home systems by means beyond comprehension. Admiral Krex found himself back in orbit around Drakmori Prime, his flagship restored to its original configuration, but fundamentally changed in ways that would take years to understand. As he stared out at the stars, Krex finally understood what Elder Vorth had been trying to tell them. The humans had not been sleeping. They had been growing, evolving, becoming something that made the concept of military conquest utterly meaningless. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, Krex realized with wonder, that was exactly what it needed. Elder Vorth's personal transport approached the outer edge of the Sol system with deliberate slowness, broadcasting peaceful intentions on every known frequency. The ancient Altarian sat in his meditation chamber, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down on his shoulders as he prepared for what might be the most important conversation in galactic history. Incoming transmission, his pilot announced over the ship's communication system. They're requesting permission to speak with you directly, Elder. Accept it, Vorth replied, straightening his robes as a holographic projection materialized before him. The image that appeared was not what he had expected. Instead of Captain Reed or another military representative, he found himself facing a human female whose age was impossible to determine. She appeared young and ancient simultaneously, her eyes holding depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal comprehension. Elder Vorth, she said, with a voice that carried harmonics of distant stars. I am Director Walsh of the Human Consciousness Collective. We have been expecting you. Director Walsh, Vorth replied with a formal bow. I come seeking understanding and perhaps some hope for peace between our peoples. Peace has always been our preference, Elder, but your galaxy has made that choice increasingly difficult. Walsh gestured, and the space around them shifted to show what appeared to be a vast garden floating in the void between dimensions. Would you prefer to speak here, or shall I come aboard your vessel? I will come to you if you will permit it. Without any sensation of movement, Vorth found himself standing in the impossible garden. Plants from 1,000 worlds grew in harmonious arrangements that shouldn't have been able to exist in the same environment. The very air seemed to sing with life and possibility. What have you become? He asked in wonder. Walsh smiled sadly as she led him along a path that curved through higher dimensions. We are what your people might have been, given time and the courage to embrace change. 200 years ago, we realized that our greatest enemy was not other species, but our own limitations. They walked past pools of liquid starlight where beings that had once been human swam through calculations that solved fundamental questions about the nature of existence. Children played games that involved reshaping local spacetime while their parents tended gardens of crystallized music. The galaxy fears us now, Vorth observed. Yes, and with good reason. We tried to remain hidden, to let others believe we were still the primitive species they remembered. But hiding our true nature required us to accept their attacks on our people, our homes, our children. Walsh paused beside a fountain that flowed upward into infinity. Admiral Krex forced us to reveal what we had become. The Alliance fleets that return to their home systems, they speak of transformations, of consciousness expansion, of glimpses into realities beyond physical existence. Some of their crews have gone mad from the experience. Others have become prophets, spreading word of humanity's transcendence. Walsh nodded gravely. We touched their minds as gently as we could, but contact with transcendent consciousness is overwhelming for those unprepared. We hoped to show them what was possible, to offer them a path beyond endless warfare and conquest. They reached a viewing area that looked out over the Sol system, but Vorth could see it was not quite the same reality he had traveled through to get here. Multiple versions of the same space existed simultaneously, each representing different potential futures for the galaxy. "What do you want from us?" Vorth asked. "Nothing," Walsh replied simply. "We have evolved beyond the need for external resources or territory. We exist now in dimensions where scarcity is meaningless and conflict serves no purpose. We want only to be left in peace to continue our growth. But the galaxy will not leave you in peace. Fear of your capabilities will drive them to greater and greater efforts to destroy you." Walsh turned to face the ancient Altarian directly. "We know. That is why we asked you to come, Elder Vorth. Your people are the only ones who might understand what must happen next." "And what is that?" "A choice," Walsh said softly. "The galaxy must choose between evolution and extinction. We cannot continue to restrain ourselves indefinitely. Each attack forces us to reveal more of our true nature, and each revelation terrifies them more deeply." Vorth felt a chill of understanding. "You're considering leaving our dimension entirely. We are considering many options. We could retreat to higher dimensions where the other species cannot follow. We could spread throughout the galaxy, gently guiding each civilization toward transcendence, or..." She paused, her expression filled with infinite sadness. "We could remove the threat we represent to galactic stability by ensuring that no other species will ever be tempted to attack us again." The implications hit Vorth like a physical blow. "You could destroy them all." "We could do far worse than that," Walsh confirmed. "We could rewrite their histories so they never evolved intelligence. We could transform their worlds into gardens of pure consciousness. We could edit their genetic code so they naturally develop toward transcendence rather than aggression. The possibilities are literally infinite, but you don't want to. We stopped wanting things in the conventional sense long ago, Elder. We operate now on principles of optimal outcome for the greatest number of conscious beings. Unfortunately, our calculations suggest that galactic civilization will destroy itself through warfare within the next few centuries unless something fundamental changes." They walked in silence for a time through areas of the garden where abstract mathematical concepts had been given physical form. Vorth marveled at equations that grew like flowers and theorems that sang like birds. "What would you have me do?" he finally asked. "Return to the Galactic Council," Walsh replied. "Tell them exactly what you have seen here. Explain that humanity has evolved beyond the reach of conventional warfare. Make it clear that we represent neither threat nor opportunity to the other species. We simply exist on a level they cannot comprehend or affect." "And if they don't listen?" Walsh stopped walking and turned to face him fully. For a moment, Vorth glimpsed the true scope of what humanity had become. Consciousness that spanned galaxies. Intelligence that operated across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Power that could rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. "Then we will make the choice for them," she said with infinite gentleness. "We will do what is necessary to ensure that consciousness continues to grow and evolve in this galaxy, whether in its current forms or in new ones we help create." Vorth found himself back aboard his ship without any memory of the transition. The garden faded like a half-remembered dream, leaving him with only Director Walsh's final words and the terrible weight of his mission. As his ship began its journey back to galactic space, he composed the message he would deliver to the Council. It would be the last warning they received, he knew. After this, if they chose to ignore humanity's peaceful intentions, they would face consequences beyond their ability to imagine. The ancient warnings had spoken of sleeping giants. But those warnings were obsolete now. The giants had awakened, evolved, and transcended the very concepts of sleep and waking. What remained was a choice that would determine the future of consciousness itself in their corner of the universe. Elder Vorth closed his ancient eyes and prayed that wisdom would prevail over fear. Because if it didn't, the galaxy would learn that there were fates far stranger than conquest or destruction. They would discover what happened when a transcendent species decided that the universe would be better off without them. The warning was delivered. Now all that remained was to see whether anyone would be wise enough to listen.